guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of the Throne of Glass series, books 1 through 3. So far, it's going to be a 6-book series by Sarah J. Maas, consisting so far of Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. As I said, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, but I'll also be doing a gush video on the series, which is all spoiler-filled, so I will link that down below for you to check out if you want to discuss more. So Throne of Glass is about our main character, Celaena Sardathian, and she is an assassin. At the beginning of Throne of Glass, she has been enslaved in a slave camp, and she is approached by two characters who tell her that she can be freed from the slave camp if she becomes the king's champion. But to do that, she has to win this kind of competition between a bunch of different assassins to become the king's champion and then work for him for a certain amount of years before she earns her freedom. So she takes them up on that offer and everything kind of takes off from there. So first off, I just want to say that my opinions differ very much from book to book on each of the different elements I usually talk about within reviews, so this might be a little all over the place, but I will kind of sum up how I feel about the books so far at the very end. But for those of you that don't know, that haven't been really watching my wrap-ups and everything, I wasn't the biggest fan of this series at the beginning when I first started reading it. This series is extremely hyped on BookTube. It is huge, and I understand the hype now after completing these 3 books, but at the beginning when I was reading the first 2 especially, I wasn't as invested. It's just incredibly hyped. It is impossible to get away from this series. You can't avoid the hype. Everyone is talking about it. A lot of people have read it. It's just an incredibly hyped series. So it was very hard for this series to live up to my expectations because of how incredibly hyped it was. So if you haven't heard the hype by some magical circumstance, just go and read the series and form your own opinion before you watch any videos on it. Because it'd just be easier to do it that way. I wish that I would have read the series before all the hype started. Unfortunately, I didn't hear about it until after Crown of Midnight had come out. I think Heir of Fire was about to be released before I really heard about all the hype of the series. So just a warning there about my different opinions. I know that it's very different from a lot of people. I know this series, like I said, very hyped, so it's a little bit different than what you typically hear. So first off, the world building within this series. I thought the first book, the world building, was okay. Again, first books for me are very hard with world building. This was very much a foundational book. You kind of get little elements of things mixed in. You're not really sure exactly what's going on, and the scope is very small in comparison to the later books. Typical. It's very typical of first books. So the world building wasn't the best for me, but I still got a very clear image of how things looked, how the castle looked, for example. There's a map in the front, which I really appreciate for fantasy books, and that was really awesome. So I really enjoyed those elements, but it wasn't the strongest world building I've ever gotten. Crown of Midnight, elaborate on that. Again, map, which was helpful, but we only really saw one part of the world in the first 2 books, so you didn't really get a clear picture of the world, and again, more hinting at things and more building up of things. Heir of Fire is when the world building really took off for me. You get to see different parts of the world, and that was when I kind of got a full, well-rounded picture. There's a ton of fantasy world elements within this book, more so than the first 2, which I loved. So you get to see like fantastical creatures and stuff like that, which is what really makes world building and fantasy for me. Give me fantasy creatures, I love them. So this book had excellent world building in it, and that finally starts to kind of take off. So I feel like the rest of the series will have really wonderful world building, but the first 2 books weren't as great. Maybe like 3 stars for world building, where this one was like 5 stars for world building for me. Next, let me talk about the characters. Celaena in the first book is a character that I liked and I wanted to like a lot more and just didn't. A lot of people really love Celaena as a character, so I was hearing about all this hype for Celaena as a character, and I love that she's an assassin. Assassins are my favorite kind of character ever, so I was already inclined to like her, and I did like her. But this book is written in 3rd person, and that might be kind of why I wasn't getting the immediate bond that I usually get with characters, because typically speaking, you're in characters' heads all the time, and you kind of get to bond with your protagonist a little more. With this, you really don't. I think that's beneficial later on, which I will talk about, but with this book, you really didn't get to bond to Celaena as much, or at least I didn't. She came off very cold a lot of times. It's understandable why, but she was very cold, and I couldn't really immediately bond with her. But I did like her, and I saw her potential. This book does have a love triangle in it. The love triangle is very, very talked about within the fandom. So as far as our 2 male leads, I really enjoyed both of them. I really actually love this love triangle a lot, because it's a very strong love triangle. Every character in the triangle is a strong character who really backs each other up, and it's a love triangle where everybody in the love triangle kind of loves and respects each other, which sounds weird because usually you have the 2 other characters kind of rivaling, where this was everybody kind of wants the best for each other, and that's what I really like about this love triangle, is like you kind of win either way, no matter who like gets the girl at the end. So I really loved both of them as characters. I like them separately from love interests, which typically doesn't happen. You just kind of like the love interest for being the love interest, and I really enjoy them both as characters. I obviously have a favorite, but I like them both, and I like them both in all of the books. They are just their own strong characters, and I really enjoy that, and the love triangle doesn't make me particularly angry like a weak love triangle would. As far as the side characters, we don't get to see a ton of side characters in the first or the second book. You get a few, but not many. There's one side character that I really like. Her name is Nehemia, and I really adore her. But otherwise, you don't get to see a ton of side characters in the first 2 books. And then the third book happens, and you get a lot more side characters. So this is what I was talking about with the third person. You get to see a lot of different side characters and kind of be sort of in their heads. You're not really in their heads, but you kind of get to see what they're doing. And I love that. I love large ensembles of casts. Some people don't. Some people just like seeing like the main focus on like the 3 main characters or whatever. I love large casts of characters in books, especially fantasy series. So I loved how many characters we were getting to see now with Air of Fire. So I was all about that, and I really loved the side characters that we get in Air of Fire. Again, I'm doing a discussion. If you've read it, I will flail about them in the discussion. Go check it out. So as far as side characters, in book 3, we really get to see all of the side characters. Going back to Selena as well, I enjoyed her a lot more in book 3. My main problem with Selena in the first 2 books is I felt like her character development was taking a lot longer than it should. I'm just used to characters developing a little more quickly and being just a little stronger. I'm not saying she's not a strong character, but I felt like she was very much getting stuck, kind of plateauing in her character development and even regressing a little bit in the first 2 books. She kind of would do like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And I understand why that is. I understand why that's done. I understand it's a long series. And don't get me wrong, I get that. But I feel like I am used to a little more character development, a little quicker. Again, I'm also used to reading trilogies, so it could be why I'm just used to a little bit quicker, because you have to do it a little quicker in a trilogy than you do in a 6-book series. But I just wanted more from her. I felt like she was a stronger character than she was acting like in the first 2 books, but we finally got to see the potential of character development within this book. So if you've read the first 2 books and you have this similar complaint, get to the 3rd book. I know it's long, but get to the 3rd book and you will get to see the character development that you are wanting. So the 3rd book kind of makes the first 2 books, character development wise, worth it. As far as plot, I found all of the books very enjoyable, very kind of fast-paced. The first 2 books, I wasn't as eager to pick them up as the last one for some reason. Again, it could be for all the reasons of like character development, world building, and everything were just better for me in the last book personally. The first book was very kind of quick-paced. There's a lot of things going on with the competition and such, and you're kind of laying the foundation, as I said, of everything kind of going on and working up to what's going to happen in later books. The second book is kind of a continuation of that. I found the first half of the second book a little slow, but the last half and the last like 50 pages are insane. So that was really when it started to kind of take off for me, and I loved the entirety of Air of Fire. I found it wonderful. A lot of people find it slow at the beginning. I personally didn't. Again, I like world building and I like a lot of side characters, so that's a complaint for some people that it was too much of that, but I absolutely loved it, and I found it a really well-rounded and well-developed book, and I adored it and I could not put it down. And it's a long book. That's like, I think, over 500 pages, so it's a chunker, but I absolutely adored it. So overall, I gave Throne of Glass 4 stars, Crown of Midnight 4 to 4.5 stars, and Air of Fire 5 out of 5 stars. Air of Fire is where I really started to see what the hype was all about, and I really started to love the series so much, and I'm really excited to read all the books as they come out now, because I can kind of maybe beat the hype if I get them and read them right when they come out instead of having to hear what everyone thinks about them. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. This book lived up to the potential of what I saw as possible in the first 2 books. It finally was met with this book, and I'm so excited for the rest of the series and what's going to happen, and I cannot wait. So that is it for my spoiler-free review. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this series, and if you enjoyed it, if you had similar complaints as I did, or if you didn't, whatever. I know this is kind of a different opinion than what you typically hear about this series, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Again, if you have read this series, which I know many of you have, go and check out my discussion video, and we can talk more about all the spoilery type things there. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!